Ryan. I speak on behalf of the Jewish people. My name is Anat Morad and I'm from Israel.
I am from Israel.
Have you heard of Israel? You have? Well, I hope you heard only good things. We in Israel believe in shooting ourselves in the foot. We don't waste any time. We do exactly everything upside down. Because that way we can be special, God's chosen people. After we shoot ourselves in the foot, we blame the Palestinians. Because to blame the Palestinians is a very special honor that only we get to do. Do you ever get to blame Palestinians for what you do, your crimes? It's much easier to go through life that way.
If you go through life basically under the pretense that you can do no wrong, then you end up with scumbags like this, who perhaps is having an epiphany. You know, the one thing that I noticed quite a bit in the past year, which you probably noticed as well, is that there were a number of IDF soldiers that were offing themselves. And you'd have to wonder what it was that possessed them to want to go in that direction. Why would they decide, I can't take this anymore? I'm not exactly convinced that it has anything to do with them feeling bad for the Palestinian people. I just think that there's a number of Israelis that are aware of what the future holds for their people, like what's coming, how the arc of history is bending against them, and it's starting to happen now. We heard, and we're going to get to that in a minute. But what are your thoughts?
Well, I think that, first of all, people that serve, and even in this country, suicide is not uncommon. They have obviously higher suicide rates, higher domestic violence rates. There's a lot of statistics that demonstrate essentially the results of PTSD. So, of course, it makes sense that they would have that. And as much as Israelis are raised and brainwashed to hate, I still think that killing innocents is like antithetic to humanity in a way. So even though it might not be conscious, it does make sense that it's like your conscious, subconscious. It's how do you make sense of that? So yeah, no, they're having definitely increased suicides, increased desertions. Their military is not in a good way.
Yeah, and I think that that's only going to continue to get worse as we go forward. And that's why you're going to have some people that are going to sound the alarm sooner rather than later. They're going to see what's happening and why they're going to need to. In this case, this woman is more or less, making her hostage video, I suppose, thinking that, hey, I just want everybody to know that I said what we were doing was wrong. I know I killed about a few dozen.
How old is this video, though? Because it's just, she says ex-IDF. Okay.
Pretty recent. And so, yeah, again, I have no sympathy. I appreciate her candor, but sympathy? Zero.
No, I don't have sympathy. I'm not saying I have sympathy. I just am acknowledging the reason that ex-soldiers commit, that take care of themselves in that way is because it is still against like what we're supposed to do as people.
Ask me, especially when we are the biggest criminals in the world. Do you remember when we bombed King David Hotel long time ago? No? Good, forget about that. Remember what we did to the flotilla to Gaza? You don't? Good. Good. Stay ignorant, it's good for us. And if you have, full leftist, how dare you be educated and know what's going on? Anyway, I wanted to tell you about my stupid, crazy sister. She refused to be a soldier. Is she crazy? Why refuse to be a soldier? It's a good thing to die for a piece of land. But she refused to be a soldier without even one lie. And using the psychiatrist, I told you she's crazy. She used to go to the psychiatrist all the time in the army and cry and say, I don't want to be in the army. Well, and they used to make her wait for hours to see the psychiatrist. So she would be waiting in this hall room with usually 6 other men soldiers, and they would be crying and crying. And she'd tell them, why are you crying? And they tell her, we will never forgive ourselves for what we did.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there will be no sympathy.
No, I'm not suggesting sympathy, but it is definitely like a prelude to what is down the road for what happens in the Zio society post this, what's going on right now. They're going to be full of people that are just so beyond damaged. So,
and all in the name of what exactly? I still don't fully understand. The whims of a one madman? No.
She just said it's for land.
Yeah, for land.
But she's being very sarcastic.
No, I think that she's probably having somewhat of an outer body experience, and this is her way of expressing, going through some form of therapy, I guess. It's kind of like
she's traumatized.
Yeah, well, it's like when Larry Bowman came on the other day and talked about being on the USS Liberty, and he said to be able to talk about this is therapeutic. Like, yeah, I understand. And sometimes some people, even though they know they're guilty and they know they're going down perhaps in a very uncomfortable form of justice that may be awaiting them, I think in some respects they feel that they have to do this to cleanse their soul. They have
I don't know. I think that they're seriously just so deranged, and a lot of them are going to have psychotic breaks. That's what I think.
Well, I think she's definitely having one, and she's having it in a very unique kind of way.
Like, what did you do? You are being a soldier fighting for a piece of land. What are you crying about? Anyway, then she tries to go and have lunch. When she went to have lunch, she can hear this sound from the lunch while she's eating her knedelach. Good food in the Israeli army, best food in the...
Okay, what is that exactly?
Knedelach?
Knedelach?
I'm not sure. Knedelach. It's like, I want to say it's something like dumpling-like. But I'm not sure.
It sounds like potato-y, like a Russian Polish type thing.
Well, it might be like a potato dumpling. I don't know.
Well, considering that they're all from Russia and Poland anyway, it doesn't surprise me that they would incorporate something from there and claim it's Israeli. But of course, that's what they do.
Well, so she's eating her knedelach and her lunch, and she can hear, ooh, ooh. She thought there was a war going on. Who knows? Nuclear weapons. Sounded very weird, like creepy. So she goes outside, and what does she see? She saw 2,000 boys crying, but crying like a baby when you change their nappy and they're not in the mood for you, like that. She never forgot that. Until this day, she says, there must be something bad going on that they're not telling us about. I say to her, what? She says, I don't know. Nobody knows. The boys wouldn't tell me. I mean, her.
That's not, like, that's somebody who's not mentally solid. That is not a mentally solid person. That's somebody who's very traumatized.
Yeah, how could you be? Anything less. But how do we know that the arc of history is bending in the direction of justice? How do we know it's actually heading in that direction?
I know,
if you will. Yeah,
because 3 years ago we weren't sitting here and talking about this like we are right now.
No, that's true. That definitely does play a role for sure, and I agree. However, we are now starting to see remnants of that change happening. From the Middle East Eye, France issues arrest warrants for French Israeli women accused of inciting genocide. So there you go. Warrants targeted 2 activists, use that term loosely, accused of helping obstruct life-saving supplies to Palestinians in Gaza during a famine. You mean the famine that's still going on right now? French-Israeli Nili Kupfer-Neori and Rachel Tuito face arrest warrants in France for their role in the Gaza genocide. So
but they're French citizens as well. So that's that, I wonder if they're back in France now and, what's going to happen, because warrants for people that are not coming back.
That's a good point. No, that's fair. France has issued arrest warrants for 2 French-Israeli women accused of blocking humanitarian aid convoys headed to the besieged Gaza Strip during Israel's genocide, Le Monde reported on Monday. I think that's how you say it. Investigators suspect the 2 women of complicity in incitement to genocide in Gaza. French authorities issued the warrants over the summer as part of a wider inquiry into French citizens involved in disrupting aid deliveries. the women born in France and now living in Israel.
There it is. There it is. Okay.
Nili Kopfer-Nouri, who led the organization Israel is Forever, sounds like it sounds like Heaven's Gate. That's what that sounds like to me. They're all going to drink the cyanide when push comes to shove. At the end of the road, when they have nowhere to go, they're all going to dress in the purple robes and the black Nikes, and they're going to take their cyanide. That's what's going to happen. And Rachel Tultu, an activist linked to SAV9. The warrants follow complaints filed by French Palestinian citizens and human rights groups, which urge French authorities to act against dual nationals that played a direct role in obstructing life-saving assistance during Gaza's humanitarian catastrophe. It's one way of describing it. In June of 24, the U.S. Department of State designated SAV9 a violent extremist Israeli group that has been blocking, harassing, and damaging convoys carrying life-saving humanitarian assistance to Palestinian civilians in Gaza. Over months, activists connected to the group targeted aid routes from Jordan towards Gaza, including in the occupied West Bank, using road blockades that at times turned violent. You think? They also vandalized trucks and dumped vital supplies onto roads as Israel's aid blockade pushed Gaza deeper into famine. You know, you said that the thing that is going to kill the most Palestinians over the course of this genocide was the famine. The malnutrition.
The famine and subsequent diseases and illnesses as a result of both famine and lack of sanitary conditions.
Serious human rights abuses. On May 13th, 2024, SAV9 members looted and then set fire to 2 trucks near Hebron in the West Bank. I thought there was no Hamas in the West Bank, Jen. That's what I was told.
There is no Hamas in the West Bank.
Carrying humanitarian aid destined for civilians in Gaza. Tutu attacked the French justice system in comments to Le Monde.
It's Le Monde. It's Le Monde.
I'm not as sophisticated. I'm trying.
I'm just helping.
In the Le Monde saying, I noticed that the French justice system handles a complaint filed by a radical pro-Palestinian organization faster than complaints filed by Lawyers Without Borders and the European Jewish Organization against manifestations of support for terrorism by radical left-wing members of parliament.
I'm sure there's such radical left-wing members of parliament. Can someone tell me which parliament on the planet has a radical left? Seriously, how many nations have, you know, whether it's a parliament, legislature, Congress, whatever they call, how many have a radical left? That's interesting, because I'm pretty sure that France does not. I'm pretty sure that none of our allies have that.
Well, I wouldn't even consider it to be necessarily a radical left situation as it would be defined by somebody like this, where it's basically anybody who's even slightly off outside of the far right. Like, to them, that's the definition of a leftist in their mind. One complainant said the warrants showed that finally the French justice system is taking action. The complainant also said Kopfer-Nouri has spent years making statements encouraging crimes against humanity and genocide. Jen, you've been saying it for the longest time. There really is something to be said for how much, in many cases, more bloodthirsty the women are compared to the men.
Yeah. Well, I think they feel more emboldened. They're much more brazen. And I think that's because they have an even greater sense of entitlement. Like I said, they don't worry about somebody putting hands on them. That's what I think, yeah.
There's a reason they're called jabs. The French Jewish Organization for Peace, which also filed a complaint, said the warrants reflected the gravity of the women's actions. Collaboration in genocide is not an abstract concept. It involves very concrete and specific actions. In May of 24, Meta suspended Facebook and Instagram accounts linked to SAV9 after the group used the platforms to organize raids on aid convoys. Imagine how many deaths they're responsible for. The European Union has also sanctioned the group, saying its actions worsen Gaza's suffering. Those actions contributed further to the already dire situation of the civilian population in Gaza. Adding, Sov9 is responsible for serious human rights abuses. Why don't you just say what needs to be said and say that they are guilty of crimes against humanity and that they are responsible for probably thousands of deaths?
Well, and they're one of many groups.
Yes.
Again, like that's one of many groups. And this does seem to me largely performative. Like I said, you know, these women are in Israel right now. They're at this point, what the government in France is saying is, if you come back, this is what's awaiting you. So it's basically like a heads up, right? They're not going to, I don't think anybody's hunting them down, but they're also making a point. Like I said, so it is somewhat performative, and a lot of what our peer nations do is performative, because at the end of the day, they're not really doing anything to help the Palestinians. So they might be willing to criticize the Israelis and the extremists, but they're not necessarily going to put their necks out to help save any Palestinians. So it's, while I appreciate that, it's just, it's a little, it falls a little flat.
Well, considering how many are already deceased, how many more are going to be deceased, like I said, and like I'm sure you would agree, so much of what they're attempting to do now is cover their own asses because they know that the walls are eventually going to close in upon them. How else could they, what other rationalization could there possibly be? I don't think there is one.
Well, we're also dealing with psychopathy here, right? Like we're dealing with people that are not rational actors. So it's hard to make any sort of reasonable assessment of people that are not acting rationally, right? Like that's a big part of the problem.